A long time ago, in a quiet village nestled between towering mountains and flowing rivers, there lived a wise Zen master. People traveled from distant lands to seek his wisdom, for it was said that a single word from him could change the course of a person's life. One day, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues upon the monastery walls, a troubled young man arrived. His steps were heavy, his shoulders slumped under the weight of invisible burdens. He had journeyed far, not in search of riches or power, but for something far more elusive, peace. As he knelt before the master, his voice trembled. "Master, I feel lost. No matter what I do, I never feel like I'm enough." The master said nothing. Instead, he reached for a small porcelain cup and began pouring tea into it. The young man watched as the amber liquid rose, reaching the brim, but the master did not stop. He kept pouring until the tea overflowed, spilling onto the wooden table, then dripping onto the floor. The young man gasped, "Master, the cup is full. It can hold no more." The old man smiled knowingly. "Like this cup," he said, "your mind is overflowing, not with wisdom, but with doubts, fears, and beliefs that no longer serve you. How can you receive truth when your mind is already filled with illusions?" The young man lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of the master's words settle in his heart. Then, the master leaned in and said, his voice gentle but firm, "There are 3 things you must never say about yourself in public. These words do not just imprison the mind, they shape your destiny." The young man's curiosity burned like a flame. "What are these 3 things, Master?" The master smiled, his eyes twinkling with the wisdom of countless seasons. "Listen carefully, and let these words carve truth into your soul, as the river carves the stone." Curious? Let's explore these 3 statements and why you should never utter them. 1. I am not enough, the trap of self-doubt. The young man followed the master to a forest clearing, where a towering oak tree stood with deep, strong roots. The master touched the bark and asked, "Does this tree question whether it deserves sunlight? Does it hesitate to grow?" The young man shook his head. "Yet humans constantly question their worth," the master said. "They whisper to themselves, 'I am not enough.' And worse, they say it aloud, seeking validation for their doubts." The master then told a story. In a distant village, there lived a boy who dreamed of becoming a great warrior. Every evening, he watched the village fighters train with their swords, moving like the wind, striking with precision and power. He longed to be among them. One day, he finally gathered the courage to approach the master swordsman. "Teach me the way of the sword," he pleaded. The master placed a wooden sword in the boy's hands. "Then fight." But the moment the boy gripped the weapon, his hands trembled. He hesitated, glancing at the older warriors sparring nearby. Their movements were swift, effortless. Compared to them, he felt small, weak, insignificant. "I am too weak, too slow," he murmured. "Then fight as you are," the master replied. For years, the boy trained, but always with doubt in his heart. Every strike was hesitant, every movement uncertain. The words, "I am not enough," echoed in his mind like a curse. No matter how much he practiced, he always saw himself as inadequate. One day, a young child watched him train. The boy struck, but the hesitation in his blade was visible. The child shook his head and said, "You are not a warrior." The words struck him like a blade sharper than any sword. His own belief had spread to others. He had imprisoned himself with words long before any opponent could. His master sighed, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "You do not see it, do you? You have trained for years. Your body has grown stronger, your strikes more refined. Yet you refuse to acknowledge your own growth. You still see yourself as the weak boy who first picked up a sword. And because you believe it, you make it real." "But master," the boy protested, "I am still not the best." The master smiled. "Must an oak tree be the tallest in the forest to be worthy of the sun? Does the river hesitate to flow because it is not the vast ocean? Growth is enough. Becoming is enough. But you must first believe it." The master turned to the young man in the forest and said, "To say you are not enough is to plant a seed of weakness in your soul. And when you declare it to the world, you water that seed. Instead, tell yourself, I am growing. I am learning. I am becoming. The young man remained silent, reflecting. When you say, I am not enough, do you think it is only a thought? No. Words shape reality. They are like water, carving stone over time. Speak weakness, and you will feel weak. Speak doubt, and doubt will grow. But speak of growth, and you will become stronger. The young man clenched his fists, realizing how often he had uttered those very words. So if I stop saying, I am not enough, will I suddenly become strong? The master chuckled. Not instantly, but you will begin to remove the chains you have placed upon yourself. And without those chains, you will finally be free to grow. I have seen this truth unfold in real life. So many people, talented and full of potential, sabotage themselves with their own words. A close friend of mine is an incredible artist. She spends hours crafting stunning paintings, each one filled with color, emotion, and meaning. Yet, every time she shares her work, she shrugs and says, "It's not that good." And people believe her. They nod politely, offer lukewarm praise, and move on, not because her art isn't beautiful, but because she has already told them it isn't. One day, I asked her, "Why do you always say that?" She hesitated, then confessed, "I don't want to seem arrogant. What if people think my art isn't as good as I believe it is?" And there it was, the fear behind her words. She was afraid of believing in herself because it meant risking disappointment. So I told her, confidence isn't about arrogance, it's about truth. Your art speaks for itself. But if you tell people it is not good, they will believe you, and they will look no deeper. She was quiet for a moment, then she nodded. From that day forward, she stopped dismissing her work. She didn't exaggerate, didn't boast, but simply allowed herself to say, "I love painting. This piece means a lot to me." And something incredible happened. People started appreciating her art more. They asked deeper questions, showed greater interest, not because her skill had suddenly improved, but because she had removed the doubt that clouded their vision. The same principle applies to all of us. Every time you tell yourself, "I am not enough," you make that belief more real. And when you say it aloud, you invite the world to believe it too. But what if you change the narrative? Instead of saying, "I am not good at this," say, "I am learning." Instead of saying, "I am too weak," say, "I am getting stronger every day." Instead of saying, "I am not enough," say, "I am growing into my full potential." Words have power, and the most powerful words are the ones you say to yourself. So the next time you feel the urge to say, "I am not enough," pause, breathe, and remember the oak tree. It never questions its right to reach for the sun. It simply grows, and so can you. 2. I have nothing to offer, the illusion of emptiness. The master led the young man to the monastery's kitchen, where empty bowls lined the shelves. He picked one up. "What do you see?" "An empty bowl," the young man replied. The master turned it upside down. "Now it holds nothing, but if I turn it upright, it is ready to be filled." He poured tea into the bowl. People say, "I have nothing to offer," but they forget they are like this bowl, ready to be filled with wisdom, experience, and purpose. But if they keep turning themselves upside down, closing off their potential, they will remain empty forever. Then, he shared another story. In a small fishing village, there was a man who felt invisible. Every day, he cast his nets into the sea, pulled in his catch, and sold his fish at the market. But no matter how hard he worked, he felt insignificant. Unlike the merchants who handled gold and silk, or the scholars who spoke of philosophy, he believed he had nothing of value to offer the world. One day, while walking along the shore, he stumbled upon a peculiar stone. It was rough, unpolished, and covered in dirt. He picked it up, turning it over in his hands, and sighed. "Just another useless rock," he muttered. Just then, an old wise man appeared. Seeing the fisherman's troubled face, he asked, "Why do you look so defeated?" The fisherman shrugged. "I feel as worthless as this stone." The wise man took the stone, examined it closely, and smiled. Take this to the market and see its worth." At the market, the fisherman showed the stone to a fruit vendor. The vendor glanced at it and said, "I suppose I could use it as a paperweight. I'll give you 10 coins for it." The fisherman hesitated but decided to try elsewhere. He took the stone to a jeweler. The jeweler examined it with a keen eye and said, "There is something unusual about this stone. I'll give you 100 coins." Shocked, the fisherman wondered if the stone was truly valuable. He decided to take it to the king's palace, where the royal jeweler gasped upon seeing it. "This is no ordinary stone. It is a rare gem. I will give you 10,000 coins." The fisherman ran back to the wise man, breathless and bewildered. How is this possible? The stone did not change, yet its value increased. The wise man smiled. The stone did not change. Only the eyes that looked upon it did. The young man at the monastery absorbed the story, his brow furrowed in thought. So when someone says, "I have nothing to offer," it is like the fisherman believing his stone was worthless? The master nodded. Exactly. Many people measure their worth through the wrong eyes. They let the opinions of those who do not see their value define them. The young man frowned. But what if I truly have no talent? No special skill? The master chuckled. Tell me, does a river need to be vast like an ocean to quench thirst? Must the moon shine as brightly as the sun to be beautiful? Even the smallest flame can light the darkest room. He picked up another empty bowl. If you keep your mind closed, believing you have nothing to give, you are like this bowl turned upside down. But the moment you open yourself to learning, growth, and self-discovery, you allow yourself to be filled. I have seen this countless times. So many people walk through life believing they have nothing valuable to offer, simply because they are looking for validation in the wrong places. A friend of mine once struggled with this. She was an incredible writer, weaving words together in a way that could stir the soul. But she always downplayed her ability. When asked about her work, she would shrug and say, "Oh, it's just a little hobby, nothing special." One day, I asked her, "If you think it's nothing special, why do people keep reading your stories?" She hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe they just like reading anything." I shook my head. "Or maybe they see something in your words that you refuse to see yourself." It took time, but she eventually started valuing her gift. She stopped dismissing her work as just a hobby. She submitted her stories to competitions, and before she knew it, she won an award. Not because she had suddenly become better, but because she finally allowed herself to be seen. Think about the fisherman. The stone in his hands had always been valuable. It simply needed the right eyes to recognize it. Think about the bowl. It was only empty because it had yet to be filled. Now think about yourself. How often have you doubted your worth simply because someone else couldn't see it? Maybe you were rejected from a job and assumed you weren't skilled enough. Maybe you shared an idea and it was ignored, so you decided it wasn't important. Maybe someone once told you that you were average, and you believed them. But here's the truth. Your worth does not decrease just because someone else fails to see it. Some people are like the fruit vendor. They can only see surface value. Others, like the jeweler, have a keener eye. But the rarest people, the ones who truly see, will recognize your value for what it is. And the most important person who needs to see it? You. The next time you catch yourself saying, "I have nothing to offer," stop. Ask yourself, have I been measuring my worth based on the wrong people's opinions? Have I dismissed my abilities simply because they don't seem extraordinary? Have I been keeping my potential hidden, like a stone mistaken for a common rock? You do have something to offer. It may not be obvious yet, but like a bowl, you only need to be open to receiving. The fisherman's stone did not need to change, only the way it was seen, and neither do you. 3. I will never change. The curse of stagnation. The master then led the young man to a river. He pointed at a rock sitting in the water. That rock has been there for centuries, unchanged, but the water moves, shaping the land. Which do you think truly lives? The water, the young man answered. Then why do people say, "I will never change"? The master continued. To resist change is to become like that rock, stuck, immovable, lifeless. But to embrace change is to flow like the river, always moving, always alive. Then, he shared a story. Long ago, in a distant village, there was a man burdened by regret. He had made mistakes, many mistakes, choices he wished he could take back, words he wished he had never spoken. The weight of his past clung to him like chains, and over time, he began to believe he could never change. One evening, he sat by the riverbank, staring at the flowing water, his heart heavy with sorrow. As he sighed, an old fisherman, wise and weathered by the years, noticed him and approached. "Why do you look so troubled, my friend?" the fisherman asked. The man sighed again. "I have made too many mistakes. I can never change. No matter what I do, I will always be the man I was yesterday." The fisherman smiled gently. "Step into the river." The man hesitated but obeyed. The water swirled around his ankles, cool and refreshing. "Now," the fisherman continued, "tell me, is this the same river from a moment ago?" The man looked down. He saw the water moving, shifting, constantly changing. He frowned. "No, the water has moved on." The fisherman nodded. "Then why do you believe you cannot change?" The man fell silent, realizing the wisdom in the old fisherman's words. The young man at the monastery pondered this story. "But, Master, why do people cling to the idea that they cannot change?" he asked. The master gazed at the river. "Because change is uncomfortable. It requires effort, vulnerability, and sometimes pain. To change, one must let go of the familiar, even if the familiar is suffering." The young man furrowed his brow. "But isn't staying the same also painful?" The master smiled. "Yes, but it is a pain people have learned to endure. They believe it is easier to suffer in familiarity than to step into the unknown." He picked up a small leaf that had fallen into the river and watched as the current carried it away. The truth is, everything in life changes. The seasons shift. The trees grow. The river never stops moving. Only humans resist the natural flow of life. They hold on to the past, convinced that change is beyond them, even when life itself whispers otherwise. The young man looked at the rock in the river, still unmoved, surrounded by the ever-flowing water. So when people say, "I will never change," they are choosing to be like that rock? "Yes," the master said, "but unlike the rock, they are not meant to stay the same. They only believe they must." This story struck me deeply. I have met many people who have convinced themselves they cannot change. Some were burdened by their past, believing that their mistakes defined them forever. Others were afraid to step outside their comfort zones, thinking they were incapable of becoming more than who they were yesterday. But I have also seen people who prove this belief wrong. A childhood friend of mine struggled with anger for years. He had a quick temper, and no one believed he could ever change. He believed it himself. He would say, "This is just who I am. I can't help it." But one day, something changed. He realized that every time he repeated those words, he was reinforcing a prison he had built for himself. He started working on himself, reading, meditating, and pausing before reacting. It wasn't easy. It took months, even years. But over time, the once short-tempered boy became one of the calmest, most thoughtful people I knew. The only thing that had kept him from changing before was his belief that he couldn't. The lesson of the river is simple. Nothing stays the same. Not the water, not the trees, not you. Yet so many people hold on to an unchanging version of themselves. "I am just not good at learning new things. I will always be like this. It's too late for me to change." But none of these are true. Every moment is an opportunity to change, to grow, to shift like the river. The past does not define the future. So the question is not, "Can I change?" but rather, "Am I willing to let go of who I was to become who I can be?" The river does not resist its nature. It does not fight against the flow, and neither should you. The young man sat by the river, watching the water move endlessly toward the horizon. He reflected on the 3 lessons the master had given him, and for the first time, he saw his own life with absolute clarity. He realized that words were not mere sounds, nor were they fleeting thoughts. They were the architects of his reality. Every belief he had about himself had been shaped by the words he had spoken, whether whispered in solitude or declared in public. To say, "I am not enough," was to forge invisible chains that bound him in self-doubt. To say, "I have nothing to offer," was to turn his heart into an empty bowl, refusing the gifts life had to offer. To say, "I will never change," was to reject the very essence of existence, the constant, flowing transformation of all things. He looked down at his reflection in the river. The face staring back at him was not the same as yesterday. He had changed. And if he could change in a single moment, then he could continue changing for a lifetime. And so, he made a vow. He would never again speak words that weakened him. Instead, he would choose words that built him up. He would speak of growth, of value, of transformation. For words do not merely describe reality. They create it. The Master's teachings were not just lessons of the mind, but lessons of the soul. He understood something that many failed to see. Words are not passive. They are active forces that shape our destinies. Every time you say, "I can't," you strengthen the walls of your own prison. Every time you say, "I am worthless," you bury your true value deeper. Every time you say, "I will never change," you turn yourself into a rock, immovable and lifeless. But the opposite is also true. Every time you say, "I am growing," you water the seeds of your potential. Every time you say, "I have something to offer," you invite the world to recognize your value. Every time you say, "I can change," you allow yourself to flow like the river, ever evolving, ever becoming. Words are spells. They either curse you or set you free. And the most powerful words are the ones you speak about yourself. What words are you choosing? The young man rose to his feet, feeling lighter than he had in years. He no longer needed permission to believe in himself. He no longer needed validation to see his worth. He only needed to change the words he spoke. And so do you. Right now, take a moment to reflect. What words are you speaking into your life? Are they building you up or breaking you down? Are you speaking as though you are becoming the person you were meant to be? You hold the power to rewrite your story. Choose your words wisely. Choose them powerfully, because the world will believe what you say about yourself. So make sure you are telling the truth of who you are becoming.